Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UCLA Extension Art of Counterpoint Harmony Review video session. What we're going to do today is, during this session, is go over the first about 10 to 15 pages of the course reader, which is an overview of the basic foundational ideas of Baroque harmony, Baroque and classical harmonic practice. It is assumed that if you are taking counterpoint, that you've already had some experience with harmony before. You've taken, you know what chord progressions are, you know about modulation. If that's not the case, I encourage you to consider taking Harmony 1 first. But my experience with UCLA Extension is not everybody comes to counterpoint with a solid foundation in harmonic practice. And even if you've had it, it might be a good review. So we're going to go through these pages quickly. In Harmony 1, we spend much more time. We spend like 3 or 4 classes, entire sessions going through and giving a lot of detail. This video session is meant as an overview. So I suggest that you have some note paper out and a pencil, take some notes, and then we'll talk about these issues in our next class meeting, okay? This is the 10-page document that I have made up. And if we just do a little quick kind of scrolling through the pages, you can see there's not a lot of writing. It's a lot of pictures of things. I always feel that music theory is best as an oral tradition. It's more interesting to talk about theory than read about theory. At least that's how I feel about it. You know, imagine you have the option to have a piano lesson with the greatest keyboardists living today, or have a piano lesson from the greatest book ever written on it. And most people would want to have the live person, and that's because there's an oral tradition behind it. So what this 10-page document is are like snapshots. They're pictures, and I'm going to talk about them. And the goal is for you to understand enough about the pictures that you know what's going on, and you could always refer back to this and understand it. What we're going to be studying in these opening pages are specifically the style of the Baroque music, Baroque and classical style tonality, music within keys, diatonic harmony. Diatonic harmony here means harmony within a key. Diatonic is within a scale. When you get into the music of the 1800s, the Romantic period, this is still a foundational principle we're going to go over, but the situation changes, harmonic practice changes, and that's the study of chromatic harmony. And then when you get into the 20th century, everything kind of turns upside down. So the story of harmony unfolds over many centuries. We're specifically going back in time to the Baroque and classical period, which are basically the 1600s and 1700s. The music of Bach, the music of Handel, the music of Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven, all right? So that's where we are in history, okay? I don't want you to think that everything we're talking about is forever for all periods in music. It's specifically Baroque and classical. So let me go ahead and make this a little bit larger for you. And let's take a look at this first box, where basically what I'm showing you is a little history picture in this opening box about scales. And it works from the top to the bottom. So if you see here, I have the names of what are called modes. Modes is an old name for scale. You know, we think of scale as major and minor. We'll get to those in a second. Mode is a type of scale. And when we think of modes, we think of the modal practice that developed in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period. If you were living in the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance period, Middle Ages, basically 450 to 1400, almost like a 1,000-year period, and then the Renaissance period, about a 200-year period, 1400 to 1600. If you were a composer living in the Middle Ages or the Renaissance period, the music of that period in Western music uses modes. And there were 7 modes: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. The 5 that are the most common are these that I put in brackets, and they're called the 5 church modes: Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and Aeolian. What does the church have to do with all this? Well, the church in Europe in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and even beyond was more than just a religious center. It was a political center, an economic center, the center of the town, the center of the city. Politics revolved around it. It was very, very central. And it was, during the Middle Ages, a place of literacy and learning. And think of it like a university. So you're here at UCL Extension studying. If you were a composer in the Middle Ages, you want to study, you would go to a church. You would go to the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and study to become a musician. The main employer of music during this period, if you wanted to be paid, was a church. You have a church position. And so the church had ideas about how music worked and what it wanted to do. And so a lot of what we inherited in Western music has to do with church practice. So it's what we call the 5 church modes. You can find the modes by playing on the white notes only of the keyboard. D to D is Dorian, E to E is Phrygian, F to F Lydian, G to G Mixolydian, A to A Aeolian. All right, so let's go ahead and listen to the modes on the keyboard. I brought this little keyboard up here, and let's take a look at D here, D here. That's Dorian. E to E is Phrygian. It sounds like this. F to F is Lydian. G to G Mixolydian. And A to A Aeolian. Those are the 5 church modes, the ones most commonly used during the Renaissance, the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period. Now, what about Ionian and Locrian? Well, they weren't used as much, but let's take a look at them. C to C is Ionian. Now, you might say, hey, wait a minute, that's major. Well, you're right, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then we have Locrian, which is B to B. Probably the least used of the modes. The root and the fifth are a tritone, so it's a little bit more unstable, so not as common. So again, going back to the point that if you were a medieval composer, Renaissance composer, you're writing in modes. The study of modality is very different than the study of Baroque and classical harmony. You would study something called modal counterpoint, which is intervallic construction. They didn't think of chords the way we think of them today. They think about intervallic relationships between voices. Completely different construction. More and more as we move through time, schools offer modal counterpoint less and less, but it's a fascinating study. If you ever could take a class or you're interested in getting books and reading up on it, highly recommend it. The music is very beautiful. So, of that time period. So, for many, many centuries, these were the scales used. And starting in the Baroque period, we're going to be studying the Baroque music of the Baroque counterpoint, the music of Bach this quarter together. And during Bach's lifetime, Baroque period 1600 to about 1750, it's not like it stops, the Baroque period stops at 750. There's overlap. The Baroque is ending and the classical period is beginning, etc. But during the Baroque period, there's a rejection of modality. And there's a rejection of a lot of things that happened in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period. And 2 scales, this is the way I like to describe it, 2 scales are invited into the Baroque period of all these scales that are used during the Middle Ages and Renaissance period. Ionian, which is major, and Aeolian, which we know is natural minor. they're renamed. So, you know, when you hear Ionian, it is a major scale. Natural minor, Aeolian. It's just our updated names with them. All the other modes are rejected. Now, why were they rejected? It's beyond the scope of what we're going to do in a review here. It's a fascinating thing. I get more into it in the Harmony 1 class. But there were a lot of stylistic shifts going on at the end of the Renaissance and new developments in the way harmony is working in the Baroque. And so these two scales were invited in, the rest were rejected. And for the next 300 years, during the Baroque period, the classical period, and the Romantic period, most of the music of Western classical tradition is in either major or minor. The music of the Baroque, again, like Bach, Scarlatti, Handel, Vivaldi, classical period, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, you know, Clementi, etc. The Romantic period, Beethoven has a big step forward into the Romantic period, but you think of composers like Schubert and Chopin and Schumann and Brahms and Dvorak and Verdi and Wagner, Brahms, etc. So the music of this 300-year period is basically using these two scales, major and minor. And then when you get to the 20th century, you know, things shift again, and major and minor are used, but there's a return to the modes. So composers like Debussy and Ravel go back and start using modality, but it doesn't sound like Renaissance music. They do an updated version of it. You still use major and minor for a lot of composers in the 20th century. And then there are new scales like octatonic scale and whole tone scales and microtonal scales, and all sorts of stuff is going on. So 20th century is a mixed bag of a lot of different new types of scales. But we're going to be in these periods, classical and Baroque. This is where we're transported. So we're doing, you know, everything we're talking about now, I can't emphasize it enough. It's Baroque, classical, specific to this time, specific to this style. All right. Now, being that we're going to be using major and minor in your counterpoint assignments, let's make sure you understand the structure of major minor. And again, this is meant as a review, but you got to let me know if you have any questions about it. A major scale is defined as having half steps between the 3rd and 4th scale degree and the 7th and 8th. So scales are 7-note structures, alternate, you know, with not alternating, but they use whole steps and half steps. So you have a half step between 3 and 4. If we take a look at the keyboard here, here's D, D, E, 1, 2, 3. There's 3, 4, half step, 5, 6, 7, and then 7, 8, half step. So that's what defines the major scale. The halves, everything is a whole step, except you have half steps between 3 and 4 and 7, 8 scale degree. Now, minor is a little bit more confusing. We spend quite a bit of time of this in the regular harmony class, but there are 3 types of minor scales, and this is going to cause a little bit of a headache when you're doing especially counterpoint. There's a lot of things to navigate. We have natural minor, and then maybe you've heard of harmonic minor and melodic minor. And unfortunately, a lot of students come away from music theory thinking these are 3 different scales. They're not. We have natural minor, and harmonic and melodic minor scales are alterations to natural minor. They're not really different scales. They're altered natural minor scales. Now, the natural minor scale has its half steps between scale degrees 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. So let's bring up the keyboard. And we're in C. Let's start on C. So you have C minor, 1, 2, 3. D to E flat is a half step. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Half step. 7, 8. That's what makes a natural minor scale. Now, for right now, you might say, like, why do we have harmonic and melodic? But why do we have 3 minor scales? We'll get to that in just a little bit. Maybe if you've had harmony, you already know the answer to this. But for right now, I just want you to know what is altered. When we talk about harmonic minor, we're talking about a natural minor scale. So this scale here, natural minor scale, but with a raised 7th scale degree. So you take the natural minor scale, take the 7th note and raise it. In this case, how do you raise a flat? You raise a flat not with a sharp, but with a natural. So natural minor, harmonic minor, I mean, will be at the top, we'll have a B natural, sound like this. And so I took the B flat and did this, raised it. Now again, why does that happen? We'll get to that in just a little bit. The other type of scale we have is melodic minor. And unfortunately, I think students really get confused with melodic minor, and they often think when you go up, you raise 6 and 7, and when you go down, you lower 6 and 7. That's part of the story, but it's not quite how it's going to work, and it's certainly not going to work that way with Counterpoint. A melodic minor scale is a natural minor scale where you change 6 and 7. They're either raised together or lowered together. So if you look at the natural minor and C minor, we have A flat and B flat. So you either keep them that way, so 50% of melodic minor will be like a natural minor scale, or you raise them together. So you'd have an A natural here and a B natural there. So often when you're learning your scales, you learn it like this. When you go up, you raise. When you go down, you lower 6 and 7. Going up, so you get A natural, B natural. Raise 6, raise 7. And when you go down, you lower. 8, now B flat, A flat. You go down, you lower. So often when you're learning your scales, you raise on the way up, lower on the way down. Now that's a good way to learn your scales, but it's not what goes, that's not how you compose using it. For right now, what I want you to understand is that 6 and 7, think of them as a married couple. They go together. They either are raised together or lowered together. And for right now, it doesn't matter whether you're going up or down. They go in tandem. They go together, that you can't split them. All right. And we'll talk about why in just a little bit. All right. So this is our picture of scales. We're in the Baroque and classical. We're using natural and major and natural minor. And we know something about the structure of these chords, of these scales. All right. All right. Now that we understand about scales, let's talk about chords. And let's get some basic definitions on chords down. So 2 notes do not make a chord. If you have like a C and a G, that is referred to as an interval, or a dyad, which means 2. 2 notes are not a chord. In order to have a chord in music, you need 3 or more notes. So C, E, G. Now I have a chord. Can I have more? Yes, you can have more. C, E, G, E, D, F. Do something like that. That's a chord. This is a chord. This is more of a modern chord, but I could do like C, F sharp, G. It's not a traditional Baroque chord, but it's 3 or more notes played together harmonically, so it's a chord. All right. So again, chord, 3 or more notes. Now a triad is specifically a 3-note chord. And then we get to a very important term, tertial harmony. Tertial harmony are chords built on stacked thirds. This is the tradition that developed at the end of the Renaissance period into the Baroque. Chords were built in thirds. And what that means when you're looking at the staff is it means line, 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 or space, space, space. You're skipping every other letter name. So if we bring back the keyboard back, I'm on a C, I skip D, I go to E. That's a third. C to E is 3 notes away. Skip F, I go to G, That's a third. E is a third. E to G is a third. That's tertial, right? This C, D, E, that is not tertial. That's all by step. So the tradition was to create chords in the Baroque period. Actually, it started in the late Renaissance, but certainly when we're in the Baroque period, this is what happens. Harmony is based on, chords are based on tertial triads, 3-note chords in stack thirds, and you build them on each note of the scale. And when you go ahead and do that, we'll talk about Roman numerals in a second. Let's just take a look at the keyboard. So if I have a C major scale here, and on every note I do a triad, it sounds like this. Now each one of those chords has its own sound, its own structure. They're not all major, they're not all minor. We have some major, some minor, and even one that's diminished. Now again, this is a quick review. Hopefully you've had this before, but there are basically 4 types of triads. There's major, minor, diminished, and augmented. A major triad is defined by having a major third on the bottom and a minor third on top. Capital M for major third, lowercase m for minor third. Lower third C to E, major third, E to G, the minor third. You don't know how to count the intervals, come see me. That's a different discussion. That's something you hopefully would have had in music fundamentals. How do you count the intervals, the spacing, all right? We don't have, it's not in the scope of what we're doing now, but again, I'm here, I'm available if you have questions, if you need some interval brush up help, let me know. A minor triad is exactly the opposite. We have a minor third on bottom and a major third on top. C to E flat, minor third, E flat to G is a major third. Diminished are 2 minor thirds stacked. C to E flat to G flat. And augmented, which we're not really going to be using in this class, but I threw it in there anyways, are 2 major triads stacked. C to E to G sharp. So major, minor, diminished, and augmented. And there we go. And we even have, okay, we'll talk about 4-note chords in a second. So when you put tertial triads on each note of the scale, some are major, some are minor, and one is diminished. What Roman numerals do in music theory is they combine the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positions, but they also describe the major minor quality, because you don't have a capital 1 or 2, but you have a capital Roman numeral 1 or 2 or 3, etc. So a capital Roman numeral designates a major triad. A lowercase, like here's lowercase 2, designates minor. So 1 is major, 2 chord, a chord built on the 2nd note of the scale in tertial triad, minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, 7 is diminished, minor third, minor third. And you use that by writing a lowercase with a circle. Now, why do I have a slash through it? We'll get to that in a second. But a circle designates diminished, like here, down here, right? We'll get to minor in a second. So every major scale will have that Roman numeral setup. The system transposes, in other words. Now, in the Baroque period, you were allowed to add a 4th note on top, a 4th tertial, a 4th stacked third. But if you notice, I only did it on some chords, not all of them. And that's because in the Baroque period, you could only add a fourth note where the distance between the root and the top note make a minor seventh, not a major seventh, but a minor seventh. So let me go here. I'm going to do the same thing. This one I can write on. And let's grab a little pen. So if I were to add a tertial on the one chord, the distance between the C and the B would be a major seventh. And that was considered too dissonant in this time period. It would sound like this. C, E, G, B would sound like this. Now, to our modern ears, there's no problem. That's a very beautiful chord because it's been used for hundreds of years. After the Baroque period, it eventually made its way into chords. But remember, we're in a time machine. We're going back not to the Romantic period, not to the 1800s, but going back to the 1600s. And that was too dissonant for the time period. That major seventh outline was very, very harsh on their ears, and they didn't like it. It was not stable, and therefore it's not part of a chord. So in this style, you may never have a fourth note on the one chord. You don't do it. You have just a triad. Now, when you get to the two chord, the distance between the root, the D, and the C, that's a minor seventh. It's not a major seventh. D to C. So 2. That was legit. Here's if the root was a major seventh between the root and the seventh. It would be, that's a major seventh. They didn't like that. They liked the minor seventh. So this one, you can have 4 notes. The 7, I love this. This is musical math. 7 means 4. 7 means a 4-note chord. The distance from the D to the C is 7 notes away. So 4 notes in stacked thirds are 7 notes away. 7 means a 4-note chord, all right? I can have a fourth note on the 3 chord because E to D is a minor seventh. I can't do it on the F chord, the 4 chord, because if I add an E here, that would be a major seventh, F to E. Bring up the keyboard. Again, it sounds nice to our ears, but we're living in 2023 and we accept a lot of sound. But back then it was too dissonant. So we don't do it on the 4 chord. You can do it on the 5 chord, you can do it on the 6 chord, and you can do it on the 7 chord. And when you do it on the 7 chord, you get what's called half diminished. Half diminished, if you took music fundamentals, is when you have the diminished triad. So these are, right, minor third, 2 minor thirds is diminished, but then you have a major third on top. Minor third, major third. So we say it's half diminished, as opposed to full diminished, which we'll get down here in the minor. We'll get to that in a second. So half diminished is minor third, major third. Sounds like this. Minor third, major third. Full diminished is when they're all minor third. This is. Right. So the symbol we use for diminished is a circle, and if it's a 4-note chord in major, we say half. We cut it in half and say it's half diminished. Minor third, major third. And again, I hope this is a review for you. I hope it's not too fast, but there you go. So these Roman numerals, or these chord structures and Roman numerals, are what we're going to be using in Baroque counterpoint for our harmony. And again, it sounds like this going up. Well, 1 chord, 2, 7, 7, 4, 5, 7, 7, 7 half diminished, and then 1. That's it. And this is the same structure for every major key. All right. Now let's talk about minor, which is a little bit trickier. So for minor, we're using harmonic minor. And let me go back now. Let's go back here. And now we can talk about the scales a little bit more. But let's talk about natural minor. Like the chords we're going to use in the Baroque period and classical period are the chords from harmonic minor. But let's see, what was the problem with natural minor? Like when what happens when we harmonize natural minor? So for that, let's do some drawing. Let's go to the key of C minor. I always believe if you can understand it in C, C minor, C major, then it's just a matter of transposition. So let's do our scale. And even though we're using the key signature, I like to write in the accidentals just for extra emphasis, okay? Now, we're going to make our tertial triads. Again, I'm putting in all the accidentals. Some of these are going to be major, some are going to be minor, some are going to be diminished, and then we'll play through them and we'll see what did the Baroque composers object to? Like why natural minor caused a little problem for them, and they felt they needed to alter them with both harmonic and melodic minor. Let's see what the problem was first. So there we go. We have all the chords. And when you do this, you get 1 is minor, 2 is diminished, 3 is major, capital 3, 4 is minor, 5 is minor, 6 is major, 7 is major. And then you go back to 1. Let's put the letter names here. We have C minor, D diminished, lowercase with a circle. 3 is major, so I'm going to use a capital E flat. In classical analysis, just like with Roman numerals, a lowercase letter is minor, an uppercase letter is major. A lot of software programs don't allow you to do that, but we're going to do that in this class, okay? 4 chord is minor, F minor, lowercase G minor, capital A flat, capital Roman numeral 6, capital A flat, capital B flat, and then lowercase c. Let's do it again. Let me bring up the keyboard and we're going to play through this. All right. Now, if I were to make a progression, so first of all, this is Aeolian. This is natural minor. Let's put it over here. Natural minor. Hopefully you could read my little scribble. Whoops, there we go. Now, if I were to make just a progression out of this, and I went like 1, 4, 5, 1. 1, minor 4, minor 5, 1. Right? We have C, we have F minor, we have G minor, and we have C. Sounds like this. It's a little olden sounding. It sounds like something out of the Renaissance period. And what was happening in the end of the Renaissance period is there was more and more creation of what's called leading tone, raised 7th scale degree. It was affecting the music all over. And the Baroque composers felt we're in a new era. And we're going to create our new sound by really locking in the raised 7th scale degree. So when you raise the 7th scale degree, so you go to the 7th note of the scale, which is B flat, this note over here. When you raise it, we have to put a natural. What happens to the 7 chord? Instead of major, now it becomes diminished. Just like it is in major, a major key, the 7 chord is diminished. And who else has a B flat? The 5 chord. I'm going to raise the 7th scale degree, and now that becomes major. Just like it is in a major key. In a major key, we have 5 major and 7 major. And when you do that, listen to what happens. We get capital 5 with the raised 7th. So here's the old way. The old way with minor 5. Now with the raised 7th. Major. What you just heard is what got them excited, right? That they like that. They said this is the updated version. When I have a minor 5, like over here, let me go off to the side here for a second. Let me just do minor 1, minor 5, minor 1. Sounds a little bit like, you know, Robin Hood, Maid Marian. It sounds like olden, right? As soon as I update and I raise the 7th scale degree, I make that capital 5, because again, the 7th note of the scale is B flat. When I raise it to B natural, it changes the quality of the 7 and the 5 chord, and it updates the harmony. So instead of the Robin Hood, here's with the B natural. Old way. But I'm doing old way, I'm going to go C, B flat, C. Way, I'm going to go C, B natural, C. That's raising the 7th scale degree. So raising the 7th scale degree affects the harmony of these 2 chords, right? This one and this one. So harmonic minor means the harmony minor. It affects the harmony. It changes the harmony. Raising the 7th changes the harmony to a way that the Baroque composers liked. That's what harmonic minor means. You're changing the harmony. All right. Now, what other chords have B flat in it, or the 7th note of the scale? If you notice, this one over here does, the 3 chord. However, if you raise it on the 3 chord, you get it augmented. You get E flat, G, E natural. They didn't like that sound. That was too unstable to have an augmented 5th between the root and the 5th, and they didn't like it. So guess what? When you are on the 3 chord, boom, you leave the B flat in. You don't change it. You only change the 7th scale degree on the 5 and the 7. That's it. And that's what harmonic minor means. We've updated the chords. We've changed the chords by raising the 7th note. Okay? So done. Everyone, imagine this. Everyone is all excited. You're like, yay, we have created, we've created the harmonic minor, right? And it's the same, well, we'll talk about melodic minor in a second, but the same concept applies, that you can only add a 4th note, a 4th tertial, where you can create a minor 7th. You can't do it on the 1, you can do it on the 2, you can't do it on the 3, you can do it on the 4, you can do it on the 5, you can't do it on the 6, and you could do it on the 7, right? So I know I'm kind of going fast with this, but 1, you leave alone, not adding a 4th note. 2, you add a 4th note, it becomes half diminished. Circle with a slash. D, F, A flat are all minor 3rd, minor 3rd. A flat to C is a major 3rd. 2 in minor, if it has 4 notes, will always be half diminished in any minor key. That's the way the structure works. 3 is major. Don't add a 4th note. 4, you can add a 4th note. 5, you can add a 4th note. 6, you leave alone. Added a G, you'd have a major 7th. Too dissonant for the Baroque ear, so you leave 6 alone. In this style, you won't have a 6/7. You won't have a 4-note 6 chord in minor in Baroque period. Okay, that comes later. Again, and by the time you get to the Romantic period, they'll do it, but in this time period, they not. And here we add a 4th note on the 7th chord, and guess what? We get full diminished, because unlike in major, where we have minor third, major third, now we get minor third, B to D, E to F minor third, and A flat, because it's in the key signature. They're all minor thirds. When all the thirds are minor thirds, it's full diminished. You don't put a slash through the circle. This is half diminished, minor third, major third. This is a symbol for full diminish, minor third, minor third. Let me play through them without talking. I'll point as I play. And then back to 1. Now, do you need to use 4 notes? No, you don't need to. You have the option. So sometimes it's helpful to have them. Sometimes I'll explain that in a little bit, but you don't need to. All right, you always have the option. So you can imagine that in the church, the monks were all celebrated. They're like, we updated. If we go back to the picture here, we brought Aeolian, the old mode, natural minor, into the Baroque period. And it sounded very olden, like Robin Hood. So we raised the 7th note and updated the harmony. Instead of Robin Hood, we get everyone's all excited. Everyone is cheering, and this is always the visual I have. And then imagine one of the monks in the music program in Notre Dame Cathedral says, "Wait a minute, stop partying. We got a problem," right? Because we got a problem. What's the problem? What's going on? Well, let me explain. Here's the issue, and this is why we're going to need melodic minor. Let's go back to C minor. I'm going to make the scale here. And I'm going to go ahead and put the accidentals in. Right? So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Now, when I go ahead, as we mentioned, and we raise the 7th scale degree, we update the harmony, right? The 7 chord becomes diminished, and the 5 chord, it affects the 5 chord, it becomes major. So that's harmonically. Harmony is a vertical realization of sound this way. But imagine this monk saying in the church, we have a vertical problem, a melodic problem. They go, what's the problem? They're like, well, 6 is a flat, as compared to major. If you were in major, you'd have A natural. So we say 6 is flat as compared to major. 6 is flat, and now 7 is raised. And that creates what's called an augmented second. It's larger than a major second. So if we look here, A flat to B flat, let's look at the keyboard. Do it here. A flat here, B flat here. It's the major second. When I raise the B, it's still a type of second because the letter names are A and B. So it's a type of second, but it's larger than a major second. It's now augmented second. And everything else in the scale is either major or minor seconds. So here we have, for instance, let me do it like this. Let me do it in black. Here we have a major second. Here we have our minor second. Here we have our major second. Here we have our major second. Here we have our minor second. Then suddenly we get an extra large second. And between B natural and C, we get a minor second. You see, so this one sticks out. It's a little bit larger. Let's hear what it sounds like. Let me play it slowly. You follow along. A flat, B flat. Listen again. So what's the problem? It still sounds like a nice scale to our ears, but remember where you are historically in time. You're in the Catholic Church in Western Europe. These are where these decisions are made about music. And this scale, when you hear that augmented second, what area of the world does that sound like? What does it conjure up? Most people would say it's Middle Eastern, it's Oriental, it's exotic. Yes, that type of scale is used in the Middle East, and there's nothing wrong with it at all, but it did not represent the church. It didn't sound like the religion of the church. It sounded like another culture, another religion. And so they didn't like the sound. It was like guilt by association. There's nothing structurally wrong with an augmented sixth. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Middle Eastern music. But the church felt it didn't sound like, it didn't represent the religion, or it represented another religion. It evoked another religion. It's another way to think about it. So they didn't like that sound. So even though raising the seventh scale degree fixes the harmony, it caused a melodic problem. And they didn't want to make an augmented second in a melody. Suddenly it sounds like we took a field trip to another country, another culture, another religion. So how do we fix it? If the 6 is flat and the 7 is now raised in any minor scale, that's what you need to do to make the harmony work. The solution they came up with is, well, we got to close this gap. We got to close it. And we close it by either keeping them both lowered. So here's 6 and 7 that are both lowered together, or we raise them both. In other words, they work as a unit together. And that way, this is a major second, and this is a major second. But if you split them, if the 6 is lowered and the 7 is raised, you get that Middle Eastern sound, which they prohibited. Now, how do you know which one to use? We'll get to that in a second. The harmony will tell you exactly what to do, all right? In fact, we'll get to it very, very quickly. But that's the issue of why we have 3 minor scales. The natural minor is the derivative, the origin. And then the harmonic minor updates the harmony. And then the melodic minor is used to fix this Middle Eastern sound that represented the non-Catholic Church sound, all right? Now, getting back to how do you know which one to use? And let me see down here, by the way, I have this, we did 4 types of triads. These are 4 types of 4-note chords. The ones we're going to be using in Baroque period are dominant, 7th, minor 7th, half diminished, full diminished. Take a look at these. If you have questions, we'll discuss them in class. But I wrote out the structure for you. The bottom M's are stacked. The capital means a major third, minor third, etc. Okay, and then these 2 I threw in there, but they're more like from the Romantic period. But these are the ones that we emphasize in Baroque and classical music. Okay. Again, this should be, I'm going fast because it's these types of things would be covered in a music fundamentals class. So we'll see how you do. But again, if you have questions, I want you to ask me. Okay. Study that on your own. So getting to this idea of how do you know which version of melodic minor? Do we lower them together or do we raise them together? How do you know? Fortunately, the harmony will tell you what to do, and here's how we think about it. Let's say you're on a chord. Let's say you're in C minor, and you're on the 4 chord. Let's bring up the keyboard. Hello, keyboard. Okay, here we go. 4 chord is F, A flat, C. I know it's a little bit hard to see. I don't have color keys, but F, A flat. Now, let's say I want to make a little run through the chord. I want to make a little run up and down through the chord. All right. The chords that we're using are from harmonic minor, always. Not natural minor, not melodic minor. We're using harmonic minor chords. Always, always, always. Chords with the raised 7th. All right. Now, this chord doesn't have a 7th, but it has a flat 6 in it. It has the A flat in it, right? So if I make a run through the chord, if the chord can't be changed, if the chord's DNA has a flat 6, I absolutely need flat 7 next to it. Because remember, they have to be raised together or lowered together. If they're split, you have that Middle Eastern sound. So the chord tells you, I have A flat, I have a flat 6, I need to keep the flat 7. So here's F minor. Here's a little run. F, G, A flat, E flat, E. If I use a raised 7th, it would sound like this. And now I'm craving hummus and falafel, which is not a bad thing, but you don't want to create no hummus in this class during Counterpoint. We'll go out and celebrate after Counterpoint's done, and we'll have hummus then. We have to avoid that sound, all right? Unfortunately, we do, all right? Because this is where we are historically in the world, all right? So A flat, if the chord has an A flat in it, you absolutely need B flat next to it melodically. And notice, it doesn't matter whether I'm going up or down, right? The chord tells you what kind of melodic minor you have. Now, look at the 5 chord. Because we're using harmonic minor, raised 7th, we know that we have G, B natural, D, the 5 chord, right? You go, what are we talking about? Go back here. We're using harmonic minor with a raised 7th. Look at this. Look at this, B natural, right? That's the one we're using. So if the chord has B natural in it, here's the B natural, what kind of 6 do I need? Remember, 6 and 7 go together. If I have a raised 7 in the chord, which can't be changed, I have to have raised 6 near it so I don't have the split. And it will sound like this. Here's G major. Here's the run. I have a raised 7th. Melodically, I need a raised 6 near it. That otherwise, I'd get this. G, A flat. And there I go. I'm craving hummus and falafel again. Don't do that to me this semester, this quarter, okay? So the chord tells you what type of melodic minor. And again, it doesn't matter whether I'm going up or down. It's unlike learning your scales. Like, you say when you go up, you raise, when you go down, you lower. But I literally am going up and down. I'm going down and they're raised because that's what's going on in the harmony. So I could be on a 1 chord. Let me play 1, 4, 5, 1. And I'm going to make a 1 chord little run. 1 chord doesn't have a 6 or a 7, so I'm just going up and down the chord. Now I go to the 4 chord and I have lowered 6 and 7. I go to the 5 chord and I have raised 6 and 7. that's how it works. All right. So hopefully that sheds some light. This is incredibly important to the work we're going to be doing in counterpoint. We're going to have to be able to control this. In minor, minor is very, very tricky to write contrapuntally, and you're going to be doing it. All right, you're going to get some good practice with that. Now, the one exception to this, and we're going to deal with this in the counterpoint, I'm just going to kind of give you a little heads up. It's a little scary, and it goes like this. Let's take a look at C minor. And let's look at the 7 chord. We're in harmonic minor, so we're always going to have a raised 7th as part of the harmony on the 5 and the 7 chord, period. It always will be that the way in every key. Minor third, minor third, minor third, right? B, F. Now I add a 4th note. I add A flat. Minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third. That's a full diminished. Right? And that's what I showed you here. Look, B natural, D F, A flat, right over here. However, what did you notice? I just spent all this time saying you either raise 6 and 7 together or you lower them together. And look what just happened. This chord has a raised 7th, and in it, it has a lowered 6th scale degree within the chord. The Baroque composers allowed that. Well, an augmented 6th, an augmented 2nd sounds like a minor 3rd. So when you're arpeggiating on this chord, here's B, D, F, A flat. Right? A flat to B is an augmented 2nd, but when you're arpeggiating, they all sound equidistant. They're all minor 3rds in sound. So you would get this. The ear just hears minor 3rds. The issue, so it was allowed as a tertial structure. You could have the raised 6, raised 7th and lower 6 in the chord. But when you start doing a run through it, that's where the problem is going to happen contrapuntally. If you fill in the notes melodically, then there's certain things we have to do to keep 6 and 7 away from each other. They have to stay away from each other. They can't mix. You can't connect them. And we're going to learn how to do that in counterpoint. Okay, that's coming up. Don't worry about it too much now. I'm just giving you a little bit of a preview of some of the difficulty we're going to be dealing with. Okay, so we've talked about scales. We've talked about the types of chords you can have. We've talked about the intersection, how to use harmonic and melodic minor scales. You use harmonic minor comes first. That's always there, and melodic minor is based on what kind of chord you're using at the time. Now, in the reader and online, I also have for you. I did this because I felt like students needed it. It's every single major key in sharps, every single flat key, major flat key, harmonic minor with the raised 7th degree, all the sharp and all the flat. I give you all 30 keys. And what it has, as you can see, is the Roman numerals. It has the tertial spelling in notes, and then I wrote out the names above in stacked thirds. So you have a cheat sheet. If you go, I don't know what a 6 chord in A minor is, well, look it up. Look it up. Oh, there's my key signature. Yeah, F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. It's minor. It's a lowercase 6. Yeah, it's going to be minor, etc. Okay. I didn't do the 4-note versions, but you have the triads. Harmonic minor with the raised 7th scale degree. Let's look at A minor, which A minor has no sharps or flats in the key signature, but we're using the raised 7th. What's the raised 7th note of A minor? It's G, and therefore it has to be, let me make it larger, it has to be G sharp. I underlined, I can't do it, cannot. I underlined what the raised 7th is, and you do it in the 7 chord here, and you do it in the 5 chord. That's where you raise the 7th. You don't do it in this G. You don't do it in the 3 chord. You only do it in the 7 and the 5. And that way you get away from the Robin Hood sound, okay? So you have this as a guide. I want you to use it all quarter long. It will really help you, okay? Now, we're going to move into talking about chord progressions. Now that we have chords, how did the Baroque composers use them? Could they just do whatever they want? Could they put any chord in any order? Well, not really. They had a belief system, and I don't like to call it a rule. They had a style. They had a stylistic belief system. Rules just don't sound very creative to me. I don't like that term. Their style, this is a style study. And the way they use chords is actually a very beautiful, creative endeavor. What did the composers, the question comes up, what did Baroque composers do with chords? How did they think about them? And how did they, progress from one chord to another? Was there any system? Was there any belief system? And as I alluded to just a second ago, yes, there absolutely was. And for this picture, we go to this page, which is Chord Progressions, and you can see I wrote, foundation of functional harmony. Well, what does functional mean? And what is this downward root absorption by thirds? All right, let me explain what this is, because this is a very important and crucial foundational understanding of how chords worked in the Baroque and Classical period, and even throughout the Romantic period, although things began to shift quite a bit. So here's how we're going to do it. Let's go to the key of C. Again, if you can understand it in C major, C minor, it's just a matter of transposition, okay? Now, let's go to our one chord, just C major. Without the one chord, you don't really have the basis of the chord. You don't have the root, you don't have the tonic, you don't have the tonal center, all right? So let's start on a one chord. And let's bring up the keyboard. And here we go. Now the question comes up, what chord should he move to next? Or can you just do whatever you want? So there's some options. If you, for instance, let's say you go to a 2 chord. Notice that there are no tones in common between 1 and 2. They're all completely different notes. The Baroque composers didn't quite feel that was the best choice. Let's erase it. What they believed was that I always say Baroque composers are the most polite composers of all the composers. They want everything to be smooth and easy on your ears and connected. Maybe you've heard the term a smooth chord progression. Well, that actually in the Baroque period means something very definite. They felt that the next chord one should move to, must at least have the root in common with the next chord. In other words, C would also be in the next chord. And if you go down by a third from C to A and build a chord, you can see that not only do we absorb into the next chord the root, we also absorb the third. This chord is A minor, which is 6. So in other words, by going down a third, I'm able to absorb the energy of the root and the third of the previous chord. It sounds like this. Notice here's the D and the E that are in common. I release the G and add the A below. So there's a lot in common. Well, if that worked, let's keep following the pattern. Let's go down another third. And we can see that now, once again, we're absorbing the root and the third into the next chord. This is an F chord, and it's a 4 chord. Let's keep the system going, the pattern going. I absorb the root, I absorb the third, and now we're on a 2 chord. I'm going to need a bass clef here. Let's do that. Okay. So now we get this sound. By going down a third, you're absorbing very important notes. Remember, there's an overtone series. All notes have energy. You're literally carrying the energy through into the next chord. And so smooth actually means something. Smooth in this period meant a connectedness of sound. And they felt that that was easy on the ears. It made sense to them orally. Let's keep going. What happens if we go down another third? We end up on the B diminished chord, which is 7. We go down another third. And here's the B here, and here's the D here. I'm just in the bass clef, and now we're on the 5. And then we go down another third, and we just keep doing the same thing, and then we're on the 3. And then guess where we end up? We end up back on the 1 chord again, and we've used all the chords. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the chords. And here's what we got. Let's listen to it. Downward root absorption by thirds. This is how some theory books describe it. Now, some books describe progression of chords by root motion of fifths. In some ways, that's more common. But I never like it as much because I think this does a better job of explaining it. If you look at authors like Stephen Costa in his 20th Century Harmony book, where he's reviewing tonal practice, he talks about root absorption by thirds and explains it this way. I think it's a smart way to do it. Not every book does it, not every teacher does it, but one of my teachers did it. I like it this way very much. I think it's very clear to see why chords are moving in a certain order, that they're how they're connected. Now notice here, so here's what I wrote out. You know, I did it here, but here's the printed version. Now notice there are a few changes on this. Notice I put a big X through 3. You might be saying, what's wrong with Steve? What does he have against the 3 chord? Well, we'll talk. 3 for the Baroque composers was a problematic chord, okay? And before we get to that, I want to talk about the 7 and the 5/7. Because notice here, I have 4 notes. It was very common in the Baroque period to follow, well, they believed that the diminished chord was a little bit incomplete sounding. All the chords in a scale are major or minor, except for the 7 chord, which is diminished. And they felt it was a little weak. And so often what happens in the Baroque period is the 7 chord, all 3 notes get absorbed and turn into the 5/7. So here's BDF, and here's BDF. All I did was add the G. It's a very common pattern to have a 7 is BDF. Rather than let go of the top note and add the G, keep the diminished and add the G. They're really very similar sounds. 7, 5/7. 7 gets absorbed into the 5/7. You think of it like a unit. This is all a unit. 7 followed by 5/7. Now, why does that cross out 3? Well, for that, we need to revisit this concept about tonal tendencies. Tonal tendencies are notes and scales that are pulled in a direction. In major scales, the 2 strongest tendency tones are scale degree 7 and 4. 7 is pulled to the direction of 8. So 5, 6, 7, let's go up to 8, or we use the word resolve. 7 to 8. 4 wants to fall to 3. 4 4, 3. It has a tendency to. Why does that happen? You know, would have to revisit music fundamentals. It has to do with acoustics and overtones and all sorts of stuff. But these tones, for centuries and centuries, are deemed. They're not that they're very important, but they're weak in a way, and that they're pulled in a direction. They need to resolve. Now, when you put those two notes together, there's two scale degrees, it creates seismic energy, right? And you get double need to resolve. Scale degree 4 and 7 notes F and B live in the 7 and the 5/7 chord. There's the B and there's the F. And when the 7 gets absorbed into the 5/7, we still have the B and F. And those two notes have to resolve. 7 to 8, 4 to 3, together. An interval is called a tritone. Resolution. Okay. Now, the need to resolve those tendency tones was the most important thing that happens when you're on the 7 and the 5/7. You must resolve them together. When you resolve, you end up on a 1 chord. You don't end up on a 3 chord. If you notice here, the B should go up to a C, but when you go to a 3 chord, it stays the same. The F over here does go down to E. So in other words, if you're on a 5/7, E, B, D, F, and you go to a 3 chord, the F will come down, but the B stays the same. Watch the B. So you get unsatisfactory resolution. Only the F comes down. You want to hear them both resolve. So the need to resolve is more important than to go down by a third and land up on the 3 chord. The 3 becomes the most neglected chord of the Baroque period. It will have importance in certain situations like modulation, etc. But as a chord in a progression, it's not that it's never used. It's very rarely used. It's sparingly used. They didn't know what to do with it. So in this class, we are going to, for the most part, avoid 3, okay? We will be using it, but later on in the quarter, okay? And that is why we avoid it, because of the tonal tendencies, okay? Now, what I just explained is downward root absorption by thirds, and we understand the Baroque politeness. I want you to hear sounds that we've had into the next chord. There's a linear progression and a similarity between the sounds, a commonality between the sounds. Now, in music theory, we group chords together into 3 main categories. It was understood that 1s and 6s are very similar, 4s and 2s are very similar, and because of the tritone, the scale degree 7 and 4, that 7 and 5/7 are very similar. 1s and 6s were called tonic category chords. Tonic means 1, but these are tonic category chords. 4s and 2s are predominant chords, and 7s and 5s are dominant category chords. These are the 3 categories of chords, and it works exactly, by the way, the same for minor. The same progression, but you're using the minor chords. Same exact thing, okay? So tonic, predominant, dominant. Those are our 3 functional chords have functions, and they belong. Function means one of those categories: tonic, predominant, or dominant. So I've taken this down 1/6. Let me play this downward motion. 1/6, starting here. The tonics 4/2, predominant 7/5, dominant, and then 1. Back to the tonic. And I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to rewrite it so that you see it with these groupings. So let's look at the next page. There it is. 1s and 6s, tonic, 4s and 2s, predominant, 7 and 5/7, dominant. Tonic category chords are considered stable. They have the tonic note in it, the root of the scale. The dominants are the most tense because of those tonal tendencies, scale degree 7 and 4 that need to resolve. So they have tension. And 4s and 2s are like in the middle. And they're sometimes I call them appetizers to the dominant. They lead to the dominant. They help usher in the dominant sound. So they're in between. Okay. Now let me play this progression in a different, rather than playing it like this, downward motion. Let me just play it with different inversions. You don't have to worry about it, but you would just hear it in kind of a keyboard harmony style. 1 6 4 2 7 5 1. Listen again. Every chord is connected by tones that came before, the roots and the thirds. And every chord has a function. It's either functioning as a stable position, a very tense, or it's kind of somewhere in the middle. All right. That's what we mean by functional progression. Okay. Now, what do we do? So now we understand the belief system that chords should have things in common with what came before. But does this mean that you always have to do it in that order? And those are the only chords you could use? No. The story is just beginning. All right. This is just the beginning. Okay. So basically, here's how I like to describe it. When you are making Baroque chord progressions, you always want to start on a tonic. It's polite. Don't start on a 6 chord. Don't start on a 4 chord. Don't start on a 2 chord. Start on a 1 chord. You might be able to start on a 5 chord, but for right now, let's be polite. We're going to start on 1 and end on 1. The basic function of music is to be relaxed and then to be tense, and then relax and be tense. This reflects the human condition. Think of your heartbeat. Your heartbeat squeezes, it's tense, and then it opens, it relaxes. Squeezes and relaxes. You're breathing in, tension, you breathe out, you release. Tension release is part of the human experience, and music reflects that, tonally, obviously. So what you do in these types of progressions is you start on a tonic and you cycle. A cycle means you must reach the tension. Think about your breath again. I'm relaxed. I take a deep breath in. I hold. I'm tense, and then you relax. So a cycle means tonic to dominant, back to tonic. That's a cycle. Tonic to dominant, and then back to tonic. That is one cycle, right? The quickest way to do that is to go 1 5 7 1. All right. But you said, hey, Steve, you just talked about you have to go down by thirds. Here's the deal. As long as you are moving left to right, so starting here and moving left to right, you will be absorbing proper tones. You can skip, in other words. So you move left to right, and as soon as you start moving, you must complete a cycle. A cycle means you reach a dominant and then go back to the tonic. So I can go all the way through. I can go 1 6 or 2 7 5 7 1. I can also just go 1 5 7. As long as I'm moving left to right, I can skip anything in the middle, but I must go left to right. So here's 1. I go all the way to 5 7, and then I cycle back. That's a cycle, tonic dominant. So if I play around with skipping, I can go like this. Maybe 1, I'll skip 6, I'll go to 4. And then I'll go right to 5. Then I cycle back. You must reach a dominant to complete a cycle. I can't say that strongly enough. You must reach a dominant to complete a cycle. All right. I can do this 1, 6, and then go straight to 5. And then back. I can go 1, 6, 2, 5, 7, and then back. Right? Something like that. I can skip as long as I'm making these circles. Okay. So move left to right, stable to unstable, keep cycling. What you may not do is go backwards. You may not go right to left, meaning you don't want to go 2 to 4 or 4 to 6 or 6 to 1. Right? As soon as you start, you have to go left to right. So you don't want to go 1, 6, 1, 4, and then 6. 1, 4, and then 6. You have to go left to right. Why am I making such a stink about this? Well, if you go right to left, it's regressive. Remember, when you're going downward, it's going left to right. You're absorbing roots. Okay? But if you do this, if you go, let's say 4, 6, you go 1, 4, and then you go 6, you go backwards, you lose the root. So let's take a look back here. 4, let's look at the keyboard. Here's 4. And if I go to 6, but 4, and I go backwards to 6, I let go of the root. I didn't absorb the root. You want to go 4, 2. 2 absorbs the root, right? So if I go 4 to 6, I let go of the root. But if I go 4 to 2, I absorb the root. If I go 6 to 4, I absorb the root of the A, right? So everything going left to right will absorb. Everything going the other way, going up, will lose the root. So therefore, once you start your journey on a chord progression, you can jump all the way to 5, 7. But if you're using other chords in between, they must go in this order. 1, I can skip 6, I can skip 4, I can go 1, 2, but I have to complete a cycle. I can't say, oh, I'll skip the dominant. You may never skip a dominant in a cycle. You have to reach the dominant. So I can't go 1, 2, oh, I'll skip the 5 and go back to 1. No, you have to go 1, 2, reach a 7 or a 5, and then cycle back. That's how it works, all right? So if we draw some progressions, if I do our little 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 7, right? Here's just some examples, right? I can go 1, 4, right? I could skip the 6. Remember, I have to reach a dominant. Should I do the 2? No, I'll go to a 7. Remember, I told you 7 usually gets absorbed into the 5, 7. So I'll go 5, 7 next. They're like a unit. Do I have to go back to 1? Can I skip 1 and go to 6? You can go to 6. You can resolve to 6. So let's do another cycle in the same progression. So I went 5, 7, 6. Let's go to 2. 6, 2, 5, 7, and then back to 1. This is a complete progression, right? There are 2 cycles, tonic to dominant, and then starting over again. but it's like one long progression. And it's the same thing in minor. Here's minor 1, major 6. Those are your tonic categories. Minor 4, 2 diminished. Those are your predominant. And because we're using harmonic minor, we have diminished and 5/7, capital 5. So I can do minor 1. Here's what it sounds like all the way through. I can go 1, 4. Let's say I skip 6. 1, 4, 2, 5, 7. Let's go to 6. Let's go to 5. Let's skip the predominant altogether. Go right to 5, 7, and then 1. So I have this resolution, 5, 7 to 6, and then that little cycle. Sounds like this. Very, very typical. All right. So you have a lot of variety. That tells you, hopefully we're learning about what it means to be functional. Chords belong to these 3 categories, and they traditionally progress in a certain way. Okay. Other topics. If I only use the chords within a key, all music would be a little bit boring. Imagine a symphony that only used, 1, 6, 4, 2, 5, 1. It'd be a little bit, All right, I get it. There's not a lot of color with just, 7 chords. The composers said, hey, we have 30 keys. We have 30 keys. Can I move around a little bit in a piece of music, or can't I borrow a chord from another key? Can I borrow a chord from another key? And the answer is yes, you may. And we get into the world now of what are called secondary dominants. Sometimes books will refer to them as applied dominants. I like the term secondary dominant. And what is a secondary dominant? It's a borrowed chord. We're going to color our progression now with some borrowed chords. And here's the thing that's important to know. In the Baroque period and the classical period, let's say I'm in the key of C major. Let's say this is in the key of C major here. And I'm playing in the key of C major. And I just told you, we're allowed to go to another key and borrow a chord. Can you borrow any chord from any key? No, you may not. Remember, Baroque composers are very polite, and they have a methodology of working this out that will be very pleasing to the ear. So number one kind of rule, even though I don't like to use the term rule, number one concept, let's put it that way, is that you may only borrow dominant functioning chords from other keys. You may only borrow a 7 or a 5 or 5/7 from another key. You may not borrow a 4 from another key. You may not borrow a 6 from another key or a 2 from another key. You may only borrow 7s or 5s, meaning dominant categories. That's the first important point or concept. The second point is, well, which keys? Could it be any key? No, you're restricted to what keys you can borrow from. Well, why would you restrict? What is going on? Let's take a look. Let's take a look down here at secondary dominants, or simply dominance of other Roman numerals. So here's C major. Notice I have in bold, let's get the keyboard up there for some extra emphasis. Here's my 1 chord. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Why did I put an X through? And me and my X's, we'll get to it in a second, okay? Those are the diatonic, the chords, diatonic chords within key, okay? So the only chords you can borrow, as I just mentioned, are the 5s, 7s, or 5s. So let's deal with the 5-7 first. You may only borrow a 5-7 from another Roman numeral. Meaning, if I'm in the key of C, the 2 chord is D minor. I may borrow the dominant of the key of D minor. D minor is a 2 in C, but it also is sort of like a doorway. It represents the key of D minor. So I may proceed D minor with the dominant, the borrowed dominant of the key of D minor, which in the key of D minor is A dominant. I may borrow the dominant of the 3 chord. You go, what is the 3 chord? It's E minor. So I go to the key of E minor and borrow the dominant of E minor. I want to borrow the dominant of the 4 chord, right? I go to the key of F major, borrow its dominant. I go to the dominant of G major, borrow its dominant, of A minor, its dominant, right? And you can do the same exact thing with 7 chords. I can borrow the 7 chord of D minor, the 7 chord of E minor, the 7 of C major, the C chord of F major, of G major, of A minor. So the 7s or the 5-7s, all right? Now, being that B diminished is not a key, you can't borrow a dominant. There is no B diminished key. There's a key of D minor, there's a key of E minor and F major, but there's no key of diminished. So you can't borrow. It doesn't exist. There's no dominant of the key of B diminished. You can't just say, oh, I'll borrow from B minor or B major. No. In the key of C major, 7 is diminished. It does not represent a doorway into a key because there's no key that starts with diminished. So you can't do it. It's off limits. Now, the interesting thing is when you study chromatic harmony, the chromatic composers will do it. They'll give you dominants of diminish. You go, how do they do that? Well, that's why you study chromatic harmony. You see how Chopin does it or Brahms does it. Okay. It's not our concern for this class. I'm just whetting your appetite a little bit, maybe with that, okay? So these are what secondary dominants are. Their secondary dominants are simply dominants of other Roman numerals, of the original Roman numerals. What does it sound like to do this? All right, let's take a look. Let's take a listen. Let's go back to C major. You know me in C major. And let's write our regular progression. 1, 6, 4, capital F, 2, and let's just do 5, 7, because again, the 7 chord lives inside the 5, 7. So let's just be economical that way. Here's C, A minor, F major, D minor, G dominant, and C. Let's play it. Let's bring up the keyboard. All is good. Now let's add a secondary dominant before one of the Roman numerals. Let's add one before the 2 chord. I'll just do it in a random order. And the way you write it is you say it's the 5, 7 of D minor, which is 2. 5, 7 of 2, and it resolves, it moves directly to 2. And that's A7. You got to know your keys. Here's what it sounds like now. There's the A7. Wow, that really created some interest, right? The ears perked up. What happened there, right? Let's add another one. Let's add one before the 6 chord. And that's E7. Listen what happens now. 1, 5 of 6 to 6. 4, 5 of 2. 7, 1. Yeah, really interesting. Let's add one before the 4 chord. Little by little, we're decorating this. That's C dominant. Let's play it. I won't talk, I won't dictate it. I'm just advance. Every chord will be in order, right? Let's keep going. Let's add one before 5, which is D7. And now we have everything all decorated with secondary dominants. And there you go. Welcome to the world of secondary dominants. And you can do the same exact thing with the full diminish. So let's do the same progression. And let's now use diminished chords. And traditionally, this gets a little complicated, but you always borrow full diminish, even if you're going to a major Roman numeral. They like the sound of the full diminish. Full diminish only lives in minor. Half diminish lives in major. So if you were going to borrow the diminish of 4, it would be from F major. It would be half diminish. But they borrow from the parallel, F minor. They borrow the full diminish because they really like the sound. It's called modal borrowing. So when you borrow diminish, it's always full diminish, even if you're resolving to major. So imagine you're in C major, but you use full diminish from C minor. That's kind of what they're doing. It's not kind of, it is what they're doing. All right. So here is 7 full diminish of 6. And that would be, well, let me just write these in again. You have C and A and F and D, just so it's a little bit more clear. All right, so this is G sharp, full diminish 7. This is going to be full diminish of 4. And again, if I were really diatonic, it would be half diminished, but I'm borrowing from F minor. We're always borrowing from the minor version of the chord, all right? So this is going to be E full diminish. Then we have 7 full diminish of 2, which is C sharp, full diminish. And we have full diminish of 5, which is F sharp, full diminish. Let's see what it sounds like. Here's G sharp, full diminish. E full diminish. Sharp full diminish. Sharp full diminish. I'll play it without talking. And ultimately, you mix. Sometimes you'll have a secondary dominant. Sometimes you'll have a full diminish. And so if we do that, let's erase some of these now. Let's put a dominant here, and maybe we'll put a dominant here. That we have 2 of each. And this is exactly what you see in music a lot. You see a mixture of borrowed full diminish and just regular dominants. I did that wrong. I can't talk and write at the same time, apparently. All right, let's do that again. This is going to be E dominant. And we'll do the 5/7 of 2 here. And we'll do the A dominant. So now I have the mixture. Some are 5/7, some are 7 full diminished 7. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's bring up the keyboard. Okay, here we go. really makes it very, very exciting. And the same thing works exactly in minor. It works exactly the same way in minor. And I really feel like I should give you an example of that. Let's do it. Let's do it. I don't want this video to be forever long, but this is an opportunity. If you've studied this before, maybe it's a good refresher. If it's new to you, it's going to be really, really important information to unlocking the study of this incredible music that we're going to be looking at. Let's go to C minor. I'm going to C minor. All right, so I have minor 1, capital 6, minor 4, 2 diminished, 5, 7, and minor 1. So we have C minor, A flat major, F minor, D diminished, G dominant, and C minor. Let's just put a big line through there. All right. Now I'm going to also play around with this. Let's do the full diminish here. The full diminish of A flat is G. Even though I'm going to A flat major, it should be half diminished. I'm borrowing from A flat minor because that was the tradition. Always use full diminish when you're borrowing. Let's do a dominant here. The dominant of F minor is C dominant. I can't put 1 in front of 2 because remember, just like in major, anything diminished doesn't have a dominant. You can't do a dominant of a diminished. You can only do it of a Roman numeral that's major or minor because that's how they resolve. 5s, dominants resolve to minor or major. Look at this, going back here. Any 5 or 7 in a key resolves to only a major or a minor chord, not diminished. So you can't put 1 before diminished. Let's put full diminish here. And let's do the F sharp. All right, let's hear what it sounds like. We're in minor. Let me just play the black notes first so you hear the diatonic. C, A flat, F, D, etc. Now let's do it with these, with the secondary functions. Wow, look how exciting. And these are just chord progressions. I'm not even really making music out of it, but you could hear how exciting this is. And this is what composers exactly got excited by using secondary functions. Borrowing chords from out of key can really make the music sound much more exciting. These are all over the place in music from the classical period, Baroque and classical period and beyond. So we have our functional progressions. We're decorating them with only the dominants, 7s or 5s of the Roman numerals, of the Roman numeral keys. All right. Now, our last big topic for this review is about modulation. How to move from key to key. We're going to be dealing with modulation and counterpoint. It's usually understood that if you're taking counterpoint, you understand about pivot chords and modulation. We're going to do a very quick review. And by the way, let me also say there's a lot that I'm skipping, that I'm not addressing, just it's beyond the scope of what I can do here. But there are all sorts of chords that are non-functional, called linear chords, that decorate Baroque music. So there are things that we're not covering. I just wanted to make you aware of that. This isn't the only thing that goes on, but this is certainly one of the most important foundational concepts of the things that I'm sharing with you today. So it's still a lot, okay? Okay, modulation. Modulation means when you move to a new key, when you hear a new tonic. I'm in C major, I start in C major, but somehow in the middle of the piece, I hear G. The G of the scale now is the new center. How does that happen? Okay, so let's take a look. There are 2 types of modulation in music. One is called regional and one is called true. Regional is what we just did with the secondary dominants. I took a diatonic progression, 1, 6, 4, 2, 5, 1. And notice I made a little arc here. This arc represents like it's a phrase of music, okay? And I can decorate that phrase with the secondary functions, just like I did. 1, 5, a 6, 6. 5, a 4, 4. Okay. But because the phrase here begins on 1 and ends on 1, my little arc representing the melody, whatever it's going to be. Because I begin and end in the same key, there's no true modulation. This is what's called regional. Regional means I just give little pockets of tonization. This is like 5, 7 of 6 to 6 is like being in A minor going 5, 1. Like you're borrowing a 5, 1 from the key of A minor, or borrowing 5, 1 in the key of D minor. It's regional. I'm not staying there. It's like a little pocket. I didn't really modulate because the phrase began and ended in the same key. However, by emphasizing a Roman numeral, I can actually get you to hear a new key. Let's do the same thing. Let's go start on the 1, 1, 5, a 6, 6, 5, 7, a 4 to 4, now 5, 7 of 2. Rather than move on, I go, I really like that. Let's do it again. 5, 7 of 2 to 2. Let's do it again. That's D minor. The ear now said, we just moved to D. That sounds like the resting tone. What did I do? All I did was I emphasized 572, 572, got you to think of it as 5, 1 in D minor, and then I ended the phrase. Here's that little arc here, the arc here again. I ended in the new 1, and the ear said, oh, that's where we must be. So modulation is when you actually move to a new key. You convince the ear that there's a new tonic, not C anymore, D minor or whatever it's going to be. All right. Now, there are important ways of how to do this. First of all, if you are in a major or minor key, can you modulate to any key you want? Come on, this is the Baroque period. What do you think we're going to happen? No, they had a concept, and it seems limiting, but it's actually a really cool concept, just like functional harmony is a concept. Just like you can only borrow Roman numerals of you can only borrow dominants of other Roman numerals, you may only modulate to Roman numeral keys. Meaning, if I'm in C major, I can only modulate to the key of minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, and diminished is not a key, so I can't go there. I can go to the key of D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and that's it. I cannot go to any other key if I start in the key of C. Why was this? Why couldn't you be in C major and go to E flat major? The Roman numeral keys represent what are called closely related keys. Closely related key is a key that's only 1 sharp or 1 flat away from the home key. So let me explain. Let's say I start a piece in C major, and then I modulate to G major. G major has 1 sharp, meaning C major and G major have 6 notes in common. The only note they don't have in common is F. C has F natural, G has F sharp. That was a smooth modulation. When you have 6 of the 7 notes the same, it's very smooth, just like the downward root progressions have a lot in common. The modulations in the Baroque period had a lot in common. They put value in that. It's not just an abstract rule. Let's say I'm in C major and I want to go to the key of F major. F major has 1 flat, B flat. So all the notes are the same between C and F except for the Bs. D minor also has 1 flat, E has 1 sharp, and A minor, natural minor, has exactly the same amount of sharps and flats, which are 0. So the Roman numerals are closely related, meaning they're 1 sharp or 1 flat away from the home key, meaning they have a lot in common. And this systematically works for every single key. No matter what key you're in, the Roman numerals, you could be in the key of B major. All the Roman numerals of B major are keys you can modulate to that will be 1 sharp or 1 flat away from the home key. Okay, and same thing with minor. That's it. Those are where you that's where you can modulate to. Okay. And how do we modulate? We use something called pivot chords. For this, I'm going to show you this. This is our last kind of big topic. A little bit more to do, but not much. Okay. Pivot chords are the way one modulates. So what is a pivot chord? And we're going to be using these in Counterpoint for sure. Pivot chords are chords that are shared by different keys. Pivot chords are used to create smooth modulation. Let's compare the key of C major, that's our tonic, and let's say we want to go to the dominant key, which is the key of G, right? The 5 chord is G, and it represents the key of G major, right? What I'm showing you is all the chords that are similar between the two keys. In the key of C major is a 1, but in the key of G, C major is a 4 chord. Same exact chord, but different function. E minor is a 3 in C, and it's a 6 here. G major is a 5 here and a 1 here. A minor is a 6 here, and it's a 2 here. What about 2? Well, look at 2. 2 has an F in it, DFA. G major has D, F sharp A, right? So they can't, they're not similar. They're not shared chords. Even though the letter names are the same. This is F natural, this is F sharp, okay? This chord, the 4 chord, is FAC. Well, remember, G has F sharp. It has F sharp AC. So that's not a shared chord. This is BDF, and this is BDF sharp. So pivot chords are chords that are an exact match, note for note. And the way it works is you can use it like an elevator. So I like to do this. Hopefully you can see the little arrow moving around. I'm going to start in C major, and I'm going to play a little progression. 1, bring up the keyboard. 1, 4, 5, 1. Cycle. Let's do it again. You really hear C. Now I want to modulate. I want to go to G. How do I get there? You use any of these chords like an elevator. Let's say I end up on a 6 chord. I go 1, 6. I take the elevator down, and the 6 becomes a 2. Now, what do you do next? What always happens, not always, but I'd say 9.9 times out of 10, after you pivot, you lock in the new chord with the new dominant. So after you pivot to, go to D dominant. I just got to C. I just went from C to G. I used this similar chord, took the elevator down, followed it with the dominant. So once I hear F sharp and the dominant, I don't hear F natural anymore. I kind of erase C major, and then I resolve. Listen again. 1, 6. Comes 2. And you can pivot on anything that's a pivot chord. I can pivot on the 1 chord. Watch this. I go 1, 4, 5, 1. 1 becomes a 4. Follow it with a 5. It's so fast you don't even realize it happened. Pivot chords are exact matches, and you use them like elevators to go between keys. Let's look at C minor. Let's say I'm on the C minor, here's C minor, and I want to go to the key of what's called the relative major, which is 3. Not so it's the 3 region, E flat major. They're relative. They share the same key signature. C minor and E flat major both have 3 flats. So let me start in C minor, and I'll play a little 1-4-5-1. Now I want to go to E flat major. Let me go to the 4 chord. I'll take the elevator down to the 2. Once you pivot, follow it with the new dominant. Sorry, 1-4. That's a 2. Follow it with the dominant. That's it. You just slid into the new key. That's what pivots are. This is how composers of the Baroque and Classical period always pivoted and moved from key to key. You're always looking for pivot chords in this style. Later on, composers will find more dramatic ways to modulate in the Romantic and certainly in the 20th century. But this governs a lot of incredible music. If you like Beethoven, if you like Brahms, if you like, Schubert and Mozart and Bach and Dvorak, like you're going to find pivot chords all over the place, okay? So that's how that works. Now, let me share with you a diagram that I made because it also expands upon this concept a little bit. Let's say I have a sheet here for major and then one for minor. Okay, major, minor. Let's talk about major. So let's say you're in the tonic key. You start a piece, a movement of something you're writing, and you're a Baroque composer, classical composer. As I mentioned, you may only modulate to the Roman numeral major minor keys, not diminished. So big X to the 7. And you may not go outside of those keys. So let's say I'm in C major and I want to modulate to D minor. All right, I got to look for a pivot chord between C major and D minor. So here's what I'm showing you. You can compare all of these chords and all of these chords and find what is in common, right? So notice that obviously the 2 here and the 1 here are similar. Notice that F and F are similar here. And that's it. You don't have a lot of choices. I could be in C major. You go 1-4-5-1. Be on a 1 chord. Go to the 2 chord. Pivot. What do I do after I pivot? Follow it with dominant. I could even do it on the 4 chord. 1-4. Becomes a 3. And even though I didn't want you using 3, it's a neglected chord, you can use it to pivot. Becomes a 3 chord. What do I do afterwards? I pivot. Now let's say I just went from 1 to 2 and I'm in the 2 key. I'm in the key of D minor now. The only chords I can modulate to are the ones in the boxes. You can't be in D minor and go, oh, I'm going to go to B flat major now. No, no, no. You can only go to a box. You're limited. These are the original Roman numerals. You can't go to spin-offs. You have to go to the original Roman numerals. So let's say I'm in D minor, and now I want to go to F major. I have to see what's in common between D minor and F major and pivot. This is really, really difficult. You have to be fluent in key. So let's say I'm in D minor now and I go, let's say I go 1-4, 5-1, and I'm looking at F major, right? What do I have in common? Well, look, G minor is 4 here and it's a 2 here. So I could go 1, pivot down here. What do I do after I pivot? Pivot with the dominant. I did this wrong. I played it wrong. Let me do it again. 1, 1, 4, and then I'm doing the wrong chord. Sorry. All right. This is what happens when you're talking to a camera for like 3 hours. All right. 1, D minor, 4. That's 2. Now I got to go to C dominant. F. There we go. I kept going to B flat for some reason. Let me do it again. 1, 4. Pivot. Follow with the dominant. So now I'm in the 4 region. And when I'm ready to modulate again, I can go to any of the box Roman numerals. I can go to any of these Roman numerals. That's it. You're limited. Same thing in minor. Except in minor, you can't go to 2 and you can't go to 7 because they're diminished. We're using harmonic minor. The tradition was that if you're in minor and you go to the 5, you don't go to the harmonic minor 5. You go to the natural minor 5. That way your minor sounds more minor. If you go 1-5, your minor world still sounds more minor. All right. So I can be in C minor and go 1-1-4-5-1. Let's say I want to go to the key of G minor. I want to go to the minor 5. So I'm looking what's in common between these and these. Well, I can pivot on the 1 chord. The C chord is a 1 chord there and there's a 4 chord there. So watch this. I go 1. 1 now becomes 4. Follow with D dominant. Boom, I'm in the key of G minor. And then once I'm in the key of G minor, where do I go? Oh, I could go to the 3, the 4, or the 6, and that's it. That's where you modulate. We'll be dealing with everything you're writing. We're going to be finishing the quarter with a Bach invention, and this Bach modulate in the 2-part inventions app multiple times. And we're going to get ready for this, okay? All right. Chord inversions. I hope you know your chord inversions. I want you to study this page, and hopefully you'll know the symbols for root, first, and second inversion with triads. You use 6 or 6-4. Root position, you don't use anything. For first inversion, second inversion, 6, and then 6-4 here. I'm assuming that most of you, I shouldn't assume, but I'm assuming most of you have it. Study this page. If you have questions about it, we'll address it in class. Ask, see if you could figure this out. Again, this is very basic for music fundamentals. And here are the Roman numerals for 4-note chords. A root position 4-note chord, you use 7. First inversion, you use 6-5. Sorry. A second inversion, you use 4-3. And third inversion, you use 2. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And it comes from counting from the bass up. So if you're in root position, you have a root position chord, its stacked thirds is 1, 3, 5. Line, right? Those are E, D. Those are E, E is 3 notes away, and E, G is a third or a fifth from the root. 1, 3, 5. It's a numerical representation of the spacing. I put E on the bass, get 1. Bottom note is always 1. Shorthand, we just use 6. If the G is on the bass, 1, 4, 6, and we use 6-4 to represent a second inversion chord, meaning the second inversion means the 5th is in the bass, in the bottom. First inversion means the 3rd is on the bottom. The numbers, these numbers come from counting from the bottom up. It's the same exact thing with the 4-note chords. I can represent 4-note chord is 1, 3, 5, 7. I put it in an inversion, and then E, the third is in the bass, I now get 1, 3, 5, 6. Or if the G is in the bass, I get 1, 3, 4, this is, sorry, 1, 3, 5, 6, 1, 3, 4, 6. If the B flat's in the bass, I get 1, 2, 4, 6. For shorthand, we just do it like this: 1, 6, 5, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Root, first, second, third inversion. All right. Cadences. Certainly, we'll be dealing with cadences in Counterpoint. But basically, cadence is the end of a musical phrase, the end of a musical sentence. And if the end is 5-1, we call it authentic cadence. 5-1 sounds like a period in music, like in grammar. 5-1, it's the end, right? Half cadence is when you end on a 5. It sounds like a question mark. So if I go 1, 4, 5, are you there? Doesn't feel complete. It's half cadence. Deceptive is when I'm on a 5, and rather than go to the tonic 1, I go to the other tonic chord 6. So I go 1, 5, oh, sorry, 1, 4, 5. I'm going to go 5, 1, 5, 6. It's like, however, plagal cadence refers to a 4-1 cadence, often referred to as the amen cadence, because it's used so much in liturgical music. You may say, wait a minute, 4-1 is regressive. 4 should go to 5. This is an exception. It's a decoration. There's a reason for it. We don't have time to get into it though, but it's accepted, okay? Okay. Non-chord tones are notes that are used in music when you're on a chord, but they don't belong to the chord. They're literally what they say. They're non-chord tones. They don't belong to the chords, okay? We're going to review real quickly the passing tone, the neighbor tone, and the suspension. Maybe a few other ones. I'll do it quickly. Promise I'll do it quickly. Let's see how staffs what I have. Okay. This is not too bad. Non-chord tones. So let's say I'm in C major, you know, my favorite key to explain things in. And there's C, E, G. You may fill in notes in between the chord tones. And these are this is what is called passing tone, PT. Passing tone. Why is it called a passing tone? Because it literally passes between two notes. You go here and then here. It's sandwiched. I always think of a passing tone as a sandwich. It's between two chord tones. So here's listen to the keyboard. Let's bring it up. Notice that is it the C and the and it may go up or down. E and go down. It has to be approached and left by step. You step into it, you step out of it. It must be a sandwich, all right? And here I have an F. This is also a passing tone because I step into it and step out of it. It's between two chord tones. This one's between two chord tones. It has to be in the middle, all right? Now, you may have two in succession. The one exception is when you are moving from the fifth of the chord, here's the G, to the 1, the C, on any chord. The fifth to the tonic, you have the opportunity to do two. This was deemed acceptable. So it's called two in a row. They're both passing tones. So I didn't make the rules. That's what you can do. But look here. Yeah, they stretched it a little bit fine. All right. It's called two in succession. Now a neighbor tone, so that's passing tone, approached and left by step. Let's talk about neighbor tone. Let me erase this real quick. Thanks for hanging in there. It's a lot of information, I know. All right, let's talk about neighbor tone. I'm doing multicolor here. Up, neighbor tone. All right. Here's C, E, G again. A neighbor tone is you step into, you start on a chord tone, you step in, but then you go, you know what? I'm going to go back home. I visited my neighbor and then I went right back home. You go back rather than advance to a new chord tone, you go back to the tone. Original, you go back home. Neighbor tone, NT. It sounds like this. You could also go lower. You could have a lower one. You could go lower neighbor tone, CBC. They are by step, right? So this can go like this. Oh, I want the black one here and here, right? So these are neighbor tones. The blue notes are neighbor tones. They step up or down, but then go back to the same note. We have this. E. Here's this one here. E, F, E. G, A, G. This one over here. Go. That's it. That's basically we're mostly going to use for the first half of the class only neighbor tones and passing tones, and then we're going to be adding more complicated ones. So what I think I might do, so you're not overwhelmed, is maybe just hold off on suspension right now on arpeggiatura and escape tone. We'll pick those up halfway through the quarter, and we'll go over suspension. I have a feeling if I introduce it, it's just going to be a little bit too confusing. Overview. Right, we talked about scales, where they come from, how the Baroque period invites Ionian and Aeolian, and we named them major and minor. Hopefully you can review the major scale, and now you know natural minor is the only minor scale we use, and harmonic and melodic are alterations to natural. Harmonic minor changes the harmony. It's a harmony minor, and it updates from that old Robin Hood sound with a flat 7 to a modern sound with a raised 7. It affects the 5 and the 7 chord. Melodic minor said, hey, when you raise the 7th, you have an extra large gap between 6 and 7. We better close it melodically. You always raise or lower 6 and 7 together as a unit. Otherwise, you'll get that augmented Middle Eastern sound that didn't represent the church. Here are the types of chords we have in major and harmonic minor, where we could add a 4th note. We talked about downward root absorption is the basis for functional harmony, meaning all chords have a function. They're either a tonic function, a dominant function, or a predominant function. And connectedness of tones is of high value in the Baroque period. So we have this. Yet chords alone in a key could be kind of boring. So composers said we were allowed to borrow, but we could only borrow the dominant types, 7s and 5s, and only put them before Roman numerals. So you could only borrow the dominance of Roman numeral keys, and you can only modulate to Roman numeral keys. And you modulate through the use of pivot chords, and you use them like elevators, and then you end up in a new key, okay? We talked about chord inversions and cadences and a little bit of passing tone, neighbor tone. I think that's all I really want to do for this harmony review. You've watched, and so the goal is hopefully you've taken some good notes, and we're going to have in our next class session a discussion. I'm not going to go through it. I'm just going to say who has questions, and we're just going to start discussing. It's an opportunity for you to really kind of ask what you need and get clarity and clean things up before we move into composing. Okay, thank you for watching. Very, I hope it was helpful, and that's it for now. We'll see you in class. Good night, or good day, good morning, whenever you're watching. Bye-bye.